So one that we're going to move on to now, the 3:30 game that we're talking about in this one is number 19 Miami against Florida, at Florida in the Swamp, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on ABC. And Dalton, the big storyline of this game is that these are two coaches right behind us right here. They need this win badly. Badly, man. Both these coaches are kind of entering their third seasons at their respective programs on the hot seat. Mario Cristobal has a 12-13 record at Miami, the worst two-season stretch for the Hurricanes in 15 years. Billy Napier is 11-14 in his first 2 years at Florida. That's Florida's worst two-year stretch since the 1970s, man. So both these guys are entering year 3 on the hot seat right now. Miami's in a better spot, right? Miami's got an elite portal class coming in. I picked them to win the ACC. You picked them to make the college football playoff. Florida's not really in that boat because they're desperate to find any win they can come by. I think Florida's a good team. I think Florida's a top 30, 35 team in the country. The problem is, though, they play 8 of the top 20 teams in America, including Miami, man. So if you win all the other games, which, by the way, they play UCF and Kentucky as well. Those are not gimme games either. So Florida really is like, we got to win any game we can at this point right now, even though it's week 1 of the season. These are two coaches, man, who desperately need this win to take some of the pressure off their shoulders.
Absolutely. I mean, it's why it's maybe the most fascinating game of the week, right? Is because you've got these two just combustible situations with Miami, all the talent they brought in, and the way their season went last year with obviously the loss to Georgia Tech and the coaching blunders and all that, not taking a knee. And then Florida, I believe they've had 3 straight losing seasons for the first time in almost 80 years. So you're talking about two teams, two coaches. Are these the 2 hottest seats in the country right now?
It's got to be up there. There's some other ones where it's like some other coaches, but yeah, these are 2 of the 5 probably.
I mean, you just talk about 2 programs that they always have high expectations, right? They've had them for years and years and years. But I think this is an interesting one, especially with it being in the Swamp, right? And all the pressure. I look at Miami especially, and I go, all this talent you brought in. It feels like we're doing the same thing with Miami as we did for Texas for years, right? Where it's like, oh, Miami's back, and every time we think they're back, then they're not back, right? Is this Texas finally got off the schneid last year? Okay, Texas is back. Like they're here to stay. College football playoff contention, all that stuff, great. Is Miami back? Are we back to being the U, right? Are we back with all this talent and Cam Ward and Damian Martinez and every player and their mother that they brought in there, right? It's just they have to put it together, though. And that's the fascinating part, is to now go into the Swamp, in-state rival, and now if you're talking college football playoff, the stakes for all these non-conference games are even higher now, right? Because you're talking about building the resume if you do need to be an at-large.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dawn, every time I've told someone, they're like, oh, who do you have winning the ACC this year? I'm like, I got Miami. And they go, okay, I'm kind of with you because Miami's got the most talented roster. And they always say, but the reason why I'm not picking them is because of Mario Cristobal. So even more pressure is on Cristobal now because, like, man, you got the talent. You got the roster to win the ACC, to make the college football playoff. Now it's a question of, is Mario Cristobal the guy that Miami can lean on to win? And let's give Cristobal some credit, man. At Oregon, he had 10-win seasons, right, with Justin Herbert at quarterback. So I think he is a better coach than people are giving credit for. Obviously, that Georgia Tech blunder was horrible.
And it was a theme through last season. Look, they were 7-6, but I believe they were our 12th highest graded team in the country, right?
Yeah.
They had talent. They have players that play well, and guys like Restrepo and Ruben Bain and all these guys that we'll talk about all year. But it comes down to coaching and, honestly, situational football. I mean, the Georgia Tech thing, obviously, turnovers in spurts, that'll hurt them. Last year, like with Tyler Van Dyke, like those are the things that can lose even talented teams. Last year, they probably had the talent even last year of a 9 or 10 win team, and they should be even better than that this year.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, what is the matchup to watch when Cam Ward, Miami's new quarterback, is going up against this Florida defense?
It starts with Cam Ward. So I think we need like the full primer before this first game of Cam Ward and what he is and what he isn't. Yep. Okay, Cam Ward is a guy that when he's in rhythm and he gets rid of the ball on time, and he can even throw the ball vertically and make quick decisions on his first read. Last year on throws under 2.5 seconds, he had the second best passing grade in the country behind Bo Nix.
Wow.
Okay, so he needs to stay, he's not Michael Vick, he's not one of these dual threats. He can run, he's an athletic passer for sure. He can take off and run and scramble and do those things, but what he really is a rhythm passer and a guy who can work downfield even when his guys get open quickly. What happens with Cam is that late in the play, the decision-making just drops off, right? When you get beyond that 2.5-second mark, you're talking about a 53.1 passing grade, 15 turnover-worthy plays in those situations last year, Max. And he's got 46 fumbles across 4 years in his career. You see fumbles, you see throws back across his body, you see throws into tight windows, and sometimes you just see things that kind of frustrate you when you're watching him, because you see so much good when he's in rhythm and he makes great throws and he looks like an NFL quarterback. And then there's times when he's trying to improvise. He's not an improviser. I think if there's now, is he more of an improviser than Tyler Van Dyke? Yeah, Tyler Van Dyke was a statue. I'll admit that. He was like 1980s classic statue drop back quarterback that wasn't going anywhere. Cam Ward can move more than that. The scrambling ability is certainly better than a guy like Tyler Van Dyke, but he has to make better decisions. Like the turnovers will kill him. Max, in his career, 71 big-time throws and 79 turnover-worthy plays. Now, obviously, it's 2 years at Incarnate Word, 2 years at Washington State, where he didn't always have the best supporting cast and the best pass protection, right? It's a lot better now at Miami. So what comes from Cam Ward individually is decision-making and just field awareness and knowing when to play for the next down. Now, on the flip side, Florida Gators secondary really struggled last year. Yeah. They were actually the only team in the SEC with a worse coverage grade was Vanderbilt. So when you're down in the categories with Vandy in the SEC, you've got a problem. And they had the same issue of like the quick game, and when they see things, it kind of works the other way. First read and they see it right away and they can just come up and make tackles. It's okay. It's, again, when plays get extended and when receivers get deeper into their routes, right? Florida, when they get past 2.5 seconds in coverage, they are basically in the bottom 5 of every coverage metric. Like it's a struggle, and it was they have talented guys too. They have Jordan Castell, they have Jason Marshall, Florida always has defensive backs. They've always had a good secondary. Just too many mental lapses. Like there's times when they're in a certain coverage and the leverage is just off, right? And they're given the wrong release. Or there's times when they don't pass guys off between zones and things like that. You just see more mental errors. Like athletically, they can compete in the SEC and they should be able to, right? And I know there's some, like last year, there's some teams that are harder to cover than others when you talk about they play LSU. Well, LSU put up points on everybody, but you just see too many times mental lapses. And you can't have mental lapses late in the play. So when this game gets crazy and the pressure is on both sides and it's high intensity and the crowd is loud and all of that stuff, who's going to stay in it mentally? Is it going to be Cam Ward? Is he going to find Xavier Restrepo? Is he going to throw the ball away? Is he going to maybe take a sack without fumbling? Or is it going to be the Gators where, are we going to, somebody snuck behind us and we're giving up a 70-yard touchdown? Or just these mental errors on both sides are so fascinating to me because it feels like we're going to watch this game on Saturday, and every play that goes beyond 3 seconds, I'm going to be just cringing on both sides because I have no idea. It's that part that I have no idea what's going to happen on either side of the ball.
So just for reference, Dalton and I, after the Saturday games, or actually during the Saturday night games after the Georgia Tech and Florida State game, we came into the office, watched the game in PFF offices, had a great time doing that. Came back, we actually went to your apartment, and we were watching the rest of the games, and then we actually turned on the tape to work on this preview. And I remember, Dalton, you're at your desk, and you're watching Cam Ward 2.5+ second plays. And the amount of times you're like, what the hell were you doing out there? And then what you did after that, you went to Florida 2.5+ seconds. And I heard the same exact phrase over and over, man. So I'm excited.
It's frustrating because they're both more talented than that. And so much, especially playing quarterback and even in coverage, when you talk about having to communicate things, it's about decision making. And those two things were not always the best, especially it's under pressure, right? Like, Can we just make Cam Ward hold the ball and just wait for him to do just something wild? Because it's in there, right? It's the part that worries me the most for Miami in this game is the turnover battle. Because if there's one thing, and you're about to get to it, that Graham Mertz doesn't do, he doesn't turn the ball over.
Yep.
He might not give you the highest ceiling of any guy in the country, but he doesn't turn the ball over. I have serious questions. Those are going to be the plays when things break down. Is Cam Ward going to turn the ball over? Or is the Gators secondary going to give up the touchdowns and Miami pulls away?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I just thought it was so funny listening. I wasn't even watching with you because I was working on my own stuff, and listening to you go through that was so funny to me, man. So I'm excited for that matchup.
It's a roller coaster.
We're gonna be tripping on acid watching that, man. It's gonna be a lot of fun. That'd be pretty funny. Florida, though, I think offensively, they got talent, man. They got talent. Graham Mertz mentioned before. He's a top 5 quarterback prospect in the draft, according to our lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema. Their offensive line, which we'll get into in just a second, is very strong as well. Top 10 offensive line in the country for me. Good receiving core. I like Eugene Wilson. I like some of the other weapons they have there. Montrell Johnson. I know Trevor Etienne's gone. He's at Georgia now, the team we just talked about. But Montrell Johnson is still a pretty damn good running back as well, right? What I'm really looking forward to in this game is the same thing as Clemson, Georgia. Florida's offensive line against Miami's defensive line. Last year, Florida had the 8th highest graded offensive line in the Power 5, and they returned 3 starters to that unit, including one of the nation's best centers in Jake Slaughter. However, their best defensive line that they're going to play all year is in week 1 against Miami right now. Miami, number 3 defensive line in the country, in my opinion, only behind Ohio State and Michigan, 2 teams that Florida will not be playing unless they make the college football playoff somehow. And all of a sudden, Billy Napier gets a lifetime contract if he does that, honestly.
He would win Coach of the Year if he took this team with this schedule to the playoffs.
He absolutely would. He absolutely would. But Miami, man, that defensive line, number 3 in the country, deepest edge room in college football. That's why they're this good, man. Reuben Bain Jr., 89.3 pass rushing grade in 2023 as a true freshman. That is the second best we've ever seen by a Power 5 true freshman. Number 1, Myles freaking Garrett, the reigning NFL Defensive Player of the Year in his freshman year at Texas A&M. Opposite of him is Tyler Barron, who finally settled on a school after committing to God knows how many in the transfer portal this past offseason. Former Tennessee edge Tyler Barron, 6th among SEC edges last year with 41 pressures. Elijah Alston, also transferring in from Marshall. He was the 3rd highest graded edge rusher in college football last year with a 91.3 grade. So you got those 3 guys, and also Akeem Mesidor, who only played in 2 games last year due to a foot injury, but the year before had an 87.2 grade, which was 5th among all Power 5 edges, man. So your backups were some of the highest graded edges in the country when they were out there, man. So it was absolutely ludicrous, the depth and the star power Miami has in that edge room. And not only that, man, they got some good defensive tackles as well in Simeon Barrow, C.J. Clark, and Marley Cook too. So I like Florida's offensive line. I think it's a really solid unit. But this Miami defensive line, man, we mentioned how good they are offensively. This Miami defensive line is the best part of this team, and they're going to have to get after Graham Mertz because, like you mentioned, man, Graham Mertz is not going to put the ball in harm's way. And I think there's ever a weakness on Miami, it's that secondary. The secondary is solid. It's not terrible. It's solid. But I think that Florida receiving core can take advantage of it a little bit if this Miami defensive line doesn't get enough pressure on Graham Mertz.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the pass rush on Mertz is going to be a big thing if you can get to him quickly because he wants to get rid of the ball quickly. And there's not much improvisation, I should say, to Mertz's game. He's going to be in the pocket. You know where he's going to be. He doesn't move a whole lot. I think for Florida, it's always a thing, and in Billy Napier's offense, even at Louisiana, it was always a thing where they want to run the ball first. If they can get to running the ball, and against a defensive line like this, I would think about picking up the tempo. If we have success running the ball, pick up the tempo, try to gas these guys out, especially down there. It's still blazing hot down there in Florida. Try to gas these guys out, because for me, if I had that many horses on a defensive line, I wouldn't blitz at all.
You don't need to.
I would only send 4. You just don't have to, right? Even the interior rushers, they got just so many guys that you just mentioned that are especially really good pass rushers. So I think Florida has to have balance. They're going to want to get rid of the ball quickly anyway. It's what they do. The problem is if they get behind schedule, when they get in those 3rd and 8s and 3rd and 10s, and they don't have time to just throw slants or they have to work their way downfield, are they going to have enough time to do it, right? And it's a great matchup in the trenches that you've highlighted here because it's going to be, I think we're going to talk about this in a lot of the Miami games that we do.
Yes.
It's going to be, we're going to feel like we're just saying the same things over and over where it's like, how in the world do you pass protect against this team with this much talent?
Yeah.
And I know usually we're talking about SEC and Big Ten defensive lines and things like that. This defensive line has as much talent as any team in the country. And if you can't, to me, I've been saying it's the unit to watch in the ACC because there's enough talent there to take over games.
Yeah.
And if they take over this game, it's going to be a huge problem for the Gators.
It absolutely will be, man. So, which of these coaches, Dalton, will get that coveted win over a rival that they so desperately need and start the season off 1-0? Will it be Mario Cristobal in Miami and start that journey to the ACC title? Or will Billy Napier kind of shock the world and make us all recalibrate our thoughts on Florida?
This is rough. I have to do a show with Trevor Sikkema the next 2 days. And yet I have to pick against his Florida Gators.
Yep.
I just think at the end of the day, I know Florida has a lot of talent, and probably in a lot of other situations with an easier schedule, they would be better, at least have a better record. But I think Miami's the better team. And as long as Cam Ward stays out of those late play situations and throwing the ball into traffic and turning the ball over, if he doesn't turn the ball over, I like Miami in this game. 34-27, I have the Hurricanes. And I think the one guy to me that sticks out, the more that I watched the Gators in the secondary, they got a new defensive backs coach, which helps them, or it should help them. We'll find out on Saturday. Xavier Restrepo's a star. Yeah. I think he's going to be the best player on the field. I do. I think he doesn't have the biggest traits. He's not a big guy. He's not a particularly fast guy. I would bet even he might just run a 4.5 when he goes out there to the combine next year. But I don't know that there's a receiver in the country with a higher football IQ than Xavier Restrepo. We've talked about this before. His understanding of routes and coverages and releases and all of that stuff. And he's one of the best. You're somebody who pointed this out to me. He's one of the best receivers in the country at – the term, I guess, is making himself available in those late play situations. And I think if I'm Cam Ward, I just find him. Just find number 7. If you're rolling out somewhere, if you're breaking the pocket, find number 7. I think Restrepo will be the best player on the field in this game. I've got the Hurricanes by a touchdown.
That is exactly when we were watching that tape, man. I was like, dude, that is so valuable for Cam Ward. Because Cam Ward, you mentioned before, how he likes to bail out of there and just launch it somewhere. If he's got a wide open receiver, and Xavier Restrepo does an excellent job of coming back to the football and finding the football, then I think that's going to be really valuable for this offense. I'm with you. I actually think exactly Miami's going to win by touchdown just like you, but I have it 31-24 in this game. I think Miami in the trenches on both sides is going to win this game. Defensive line and the Miami offensive line is really good too. And that Florida defensive line, losing Princely and Montiel, that's a huge, huge loss, man. So I think Miami is going to win the trenches on both sides. And I think Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, the other Miami receivers that got there are also really good. They'll take advantage of a vulnerable Florida secondary that we just talked about before. So both of us have Miami winning by a touchdown in this game.